The NFL is the most powerful sports league on the planet. Billion-dollar franchises, sold-out stadiums, players worshipped like gods. Today, we're going somewhere the sports media rarely goes. We're going to the crimes, the cover-ups, the victims whose names deserved far more attention than they ever received. These are the NFL stars who killed the women closest to them. And some of these stories, you think you know, but you don't know everything. Stay with us, because the truth is more disturbing than the headlines. This video deals with real cases involving real victims, real women whose lives were taken, whose families still carry grief today. Let's start at the very beginning. OJ Simpson. His name needs no introduction. Orenthal James Simpson, born July 9th, 1947, in San Francisco, California. The son of a factory worker and a hospital administrator, raised in a rough neighborhood, OJ found his escape on the football field. And what an escape it was. By the time he reached USC, OJ Simpson was already something rare, a running back with supernatural instincts, a combination of speed, power, and vision that left defenders grasping at air. In 1968, he won the Heisman Trophy. He was selected first overall in the 1969 NFL Draft by the Buffalo Bills. For the next decade, the man they called the Juice rewrote the record books. In 1973, he became the first NFL player to rush for more than 2,000 yards in a single season, finishing with 2,003 yards. He was a Pro Bowl selection 6 times, a 2-time rushing champion, a Hall of Famer, enshrined in Canton in 1985. Off the field, OJ became a crossover star unlike almost any athlete before him. Movie roles, a beloved Hertz rental car commercial, a smile so easy and disarming that corporate America couldn't get enough of him. He was handsome, charismatic, and seemingly unthreatening. A black man who had successfully navigated white Hollywood in a way almost no one had before him. America loved OJ Simpson. And then came June 12th, 1994. Nicole Brown Simpson was 35 years old, blonde, beautiful, a mother of 2, Sydney and Justin, the children she'd had with OJ during their turbulent marriage, which had ended in divorce in 1992. Nicole had met OJ when she was just 18 years old. He was 30, already married, already famous. She was a waitress at a Beverly Hills nightclub called the Daisy. He pursued her relentlessly. They began a relationship that would define and ultimately destroy both of their lives. What the public didn't know, what the Hertz commercials didn't show, was the violence behind closed doors. In 1989, on New Year's Day, OJ Simpson was arrested for spousal battery after Nicole called 911. Officers arrived to find her face bruised, her eyes swollen. OJ pleaded no contest and received probation and community service. He avoided jail time entirely. That 911 call, the one from that night, will become one of the most chilling pieces of audio evidence in American legal history. But it happened in 1989. And in 1989, the world looked away. The couple divorced in 1992. Nicole tried to build a new life. She raised her children. She bought her own home in Brentwood. She dated. She tried to be free. She called 911 multiple times. She told friends she was afraid. She reportedly confided in people close to her that she believed OJ would one day kill her. On the night of June 12, 1994, Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman, a 25-year-old restaurant worker who had come to return a pair of glasses Nicole's mother had left at the restaurant, were found stabbed to death outside Nicole's Brentwood condominium on Bundy Drive. Sydney and Justin were asleep inside. They woke up without a mother. The crime scene was savage. Nicole had been nearly decapitated. Ron Goldman had been stabbed over 30 times. The killer had been in a frenzy or in a rage. OJ Simpson was identified as the prime suspect almost immediately. His alibi was flimsy. His behavior was erratic. A bloody glove, matching one found at the crime scene, was discovered at his Rockingham estate. His Bronco was later shown to have blood inside. Then came the Bronco chase. On June 17, 1994, instead of turning himself in as agreed, OJ Simpson was a passenger in a white Ford Bronco driven by his friend O'Callings, slowly crawling down the 405 freeway while dozens of police cars followed at distance and millions of Americans watched live on television. It was surreal. It was unprecedented. It was the moment America stopped pretending this was an ordinary story. He surrendered. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. And then came the trial. The O.J. Simpson murder trial ran from January to October 1995 and became the most-watched television event in American history up to that point. It had everything: a celebrity defendant, a racially divided jury pool, a cast of memorable attorneys, explosive evidence disputes, and a city, Los Angeles, still raw from the 1992 riots. The prosecution presented what they believed was overwhelming physical evidence. Blood at the crime scene matching OJ, DNA evidence, the bloody glove, a history of domestic violence. The defense, led by Johnny Cochran, argued something different. They argued that the evidence was contaminated, that the LAPD was racist, and that the glove, in a moment that would become iconic, didn't fit OJ's hand when he tried it on in open court. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Not guilty. The reaction split America down racial lines. Many Black Americans celebrated what they saw as a rare victory against a legal system that had always been stacked against them. Many white Americans were stunned, convinced they had just watched a guilty man walk free. Nicole Brown Simpson's family wept. Ron Goldman's father, Fred Goldman, was photographed looking as though something had been ripped from inside him, because it had. But the story wasn't over. In 1997, a civil jury found O.J. Simpson liable for the wrongful deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. He was ordered to pay $33.5 million in damages, a judgment he would spend the rest of his life avoiding. He moved to Florida, where state law protected his pension and assets from seizure. He played golf. He gave occasional interviews. He showed little public remorse. In 2007, he was arrested in Las Vegas for armed robbery and kidnapping, attempting to steal sports memorabilia he claimed was his. He was convicted and sentenced to 33 years in prison. He served 9 years before being paroled in 2017. O.J. Simpson died on April 10, 2024, of prostate cancer. He was 76 years old. Nicole Brown Simpson was 35 when she died. She will always be 35. Ron Goldman was 25. He will always be 25. Their children grew up without them, and the man acquitted of their murders went on to live another 30 years. That is the first story, and in some ways, it is the one that broke the dam, the one that forced America to at least ask the question, how many times do we look the other way? Next, Ray Caruth. If the O.J. Simpson case was the trial of the century, the Ray Caruth case was something different. It wasn't passion. It wasn't a moment of blind rage that got out of control. What happened to Cherica Adams was cold, calculated, premeditated. And the man who orchestrated it was a wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers who had decided, for reasons that become more infuriating the longer you examine them. Ray Caruth was born January 22, 1974, in Sacramento, California. He was a gifted athlete, fast, smooth, with excellent hands. He played college football at the University of Colorado, where he was named a first-team All-American. In 1997, the Carolina Panthers selected him in the first round of the NFL Draft, the 27th overall pick. He signed a 4-year, $3.7 million contract. He was a young man with every reason to believe his best years were ahead of him. His first season, 1997, was encouraging. He caught 44 passes for 545 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was growing. He was developing chemistry with quarterback Kerry Collins. There was reason for optimism. And then in 1998, he tore his ACL and missed most of the season. During his recovery, he met Cherica Adams, a 26-year-old woman who worked as a real estate agent and aspired to become a model. She was warm, kind, and by all accounts of those who knew her, full of life. She and Caruth began dating. In the fall of 1999, she became pregnant. This is where everything changes, because Ray Caruth did not want this baby. not because of any particular tenderness toward the child, but because he was already paying child support for a previous child and was worried, according to later trial testimony, about his financial situation. He had already paid a woman to have an abortion once before. He pressured Cherica to do the same. She refused. This was her child. She was keeping it. And so Ray Caruth began to plan. On the night of November 16th, 1999, Cherica Adams, 8 months pregnant, was driving home alone after attending a movie with Ray Caruth. At around midnight, on a street in Charlotte, North Carolina, a car pulled alongside hers and opened fire. 4 bullets struck her. 1 pierced her neck. She was critically wounded. What Ray Caruth did next tells you everything about who he was. He was driving in front of her, and he slowed down. He slowed his car to a stop so that the shooter's vehicle could pull alongside Cherica's car. He boxed her in. He made sure she couldn't escape. Then, as she lay bleeding and dying inside her vehicle, he drove away. Cherica Adams had the presence of mind, the extraordinary, heartbreaking presence of mind, to call 911 from her car while bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds. She told the dispatcher what had happened. She gave them information. She fought to stay alive, and in doing so, she gave investigators the evidence they needed to catch the man who had done this to her. She was rushed to the hospital. Doctors performed an emergency C-section to save her baby. The boy, whom she named Chancellor Lee Adams, was born alive. But the trauma of the shooting had deprived him of oxygen for too long. Chancellor was born with permanent brain damage. He would never walk normally. He would never live independently. He would require round-the-clock care for the rest of his life. Cherica Adams lingered in a coma for a month. She died on December 14th, 1999. She was 26 years old. The investigation moved quickly. Police arrested 3 men: Van Brett Watkins, who fired the shots, Michael Kennedy, the driver, and Sean Nipper Francis, who helped plan and coordinate the attack. All 3 cooperated with prosecutors. All 3 pointed to Ray Caruth as the man who had hired them to kill Cherica Adams. The price? According to trial testimony, approximately $3,000. $3,000. That was what Ray Caruth had decided Cherica Adams's life was worth. Caruth was arrested in December 1999, found hiding in the trunk of a car in a motel parking lot in Tennessee. He had packed food, water, and cash. He was running. His trial began in October 2000 and concluded in January 2001. The prosecution presented recorded phone calls between Caruth and Watkins, calls that established planning, coordination, and motive. They presented Cherica's own 911 call, in which she implicated Caruth. They built a case that was, in the words of many legal analysts, devastating. Ray Caruth was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, shooting into an occupied vehicle, and using an instrument to destroy an unborn child. He was acquitted of first-degree murder, largely because the prosecution could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he personally pulled the trigger. He was sentenced to a minimum of 18 years and 11 months in prison. Van Brett Watkins, the actual shooter, received a longer sentence. Caruth served his full minimum term and was released from prison on October 22nd, 2018. Chancellor Lee Adams, the son who survived, was raised by Cherica's mother, Sandra Adams, who became his full-time caregiver. Sandra spent years lobbying for increased minimum sentences for crimes involving pregnant women, in a moment that few people know about, and that makes this story even more complicated. Ray Caruth, after his release from prison, attempted to make contact with Chancellor. He wrote letters. He expressed what he called remorse. Sandra Adams rebuffed him. She said that Caruth had shown no remorse during his years in prison, had given no interviews about the crime, and had made no attempt to provide financial support for his son. Chancellor Lee Adams is in his mid-20s now. He lives with his grandmother. He has cerebral palsy. He will need care for the rest of his life. His mother was murdered before he could be born properly. His father went to prison for arranging it. And the NFL, which had drafted Ray Caruth in the first round, quietly moved on. Next, Yovan Belcher. The previous 2 cases unfolded over months and years. Investigations, trials, appeals. The horror was delivered in installments. The case of Yovan Belcher was different. It happened in a single morning. It was over in less than 2 hours. And it happened at one of the most recognizable addresses in professional football. Yovan Belcher was born August 24th, 1987, in West Babylon, New York. He grew up in a modest household, the product of a tight-knit family on Long Island. His mother, Cheryl Shepard, was the anchor of his life, and she would be there on the worst morning of it. Belcher wasn't a first-round pick. He wasn't a franchise player. He was an undrafted free agent, a linebacker who had clawed his way onto the Kansas City Chiefs roster through sheer determination and relentless work. By 2012, at 25 years old, he was a starter. He had earned a spot that hundreds of players never managed to reach. He was in a long-term relationship with 22-year-old Cassandra Perkins, his girlfriend, and the mother of their 3-month-old daughter, Zoe. They lived together. They were, from the outside, a young couple navigating the demands of an NFL career alongside new parenthood. Behind the facade, things were fracturing. Cassandra had expressed concerns to family and friends about Belcher's behavior, specifically about his increasing use of alcohol and what she described as mood changes. Some who later analyzed the case theorized about possible CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the degenerative brain disease linked to repeated head trauma in football players. After his death, Belcher's brain was examined. The results were inconclusive, though some researchers noted abnormalities. None of that context excuses what happened next, but it may help explain the inexplicable. On the morning of December 1st, 2012, Yovan Belcher had been out until the early hours of the morning. He had been drinking. He came home in the early morning hours to find Cassandra upset. She had also been out with friends. An argument erupted. At approximately 7:50 a.m., Yovan Belcher shot Cassandra Perkins 9 times in their home in Kansas City, Missouri. 3-month-old Zoe was in the home. She heard everything. Cassandra Perkins was transported to the hospital. She was 22 years old. She died of her wounds. Belcher then got in his car and drove to Arrowhead Stadium, the home of the Kansas City Chiefs, the place where he had worked to make his NFL dreams real. When he arrived, he encountered head coach Romeo Crennel and general manager Scott Pioli in the parking lot. According to accounts from both men, Belcher was crying. He thanked them for what they had done for him. He expressed, in whatever fractured way his mind allowed, some form of acknowledgement of what he had done. Then Yovan Belcher walked to a nearby area and shot himself in the head. Romeo Crennel and Scott Pioli witnessed it. They carried that with them. Belcher was 25 years old. Cassandra Perkins was 22. Zoe was 3 months old. She would grow up without either parent. The aftermath of the Belcher case rippled through the NFL in ways that were largely invisible to fans. The Chiefs, in a decision that was immediately controversial, played their scheduled game the very next day, December 2nd, against the Carolina Panthers. Commissioner Roger Goodell and team ownership decided the game should go on. Many players, coaches, and observers disagreed. NBC sportscaster Bob Costas used his halftime segment that night to deliver a monologue calling for stricter gun control. The segment was immediately political and divisive. It sparked a firestorm, but in that firestorm, something got lost. Her name was Cassandra Perkins. She was 22 years old. She had a 3-month-old daughter. She was building a life. And in the media coverage that followed, she often became a secondary character in a story that somehow kept centering on Yovan Belcher, his possible CTE, his mental health struggles, the gun debate, the Chiefs' decision to play. Cassandra Perkins deserved better. She deserved to be the headline. Next, Kevin Ware Jr. Her name was Taylor Pomaski, 29 years old, brown hair, a wide smile in the photos her family would later plaster across missing persons flyers, social media posts, and news segments. Desperate, pleading posts that asked a simple question. Where is she? For 8 months, nobody could answer that. And the man who knew exactly where she was said nothing. Kevin Ware Jr. was not a household name. He wasn't a first-round pick. He wasn't a Pro Bowler. He didn't have a Heisman Trophy or a Hall of Fame bust or a Hertz commercial. He was a tight end, a big, physical player who scratched and clawed his way onto 2 NFL rosters. He spent the 2003 season with the team now known as the Washington Commanders. He played 5 games with the San Francisco 49ers in 2004. And then his NFL career was over almost as soon as it had begun. But Kevin Ware Jr. is in this story, because what he did in April 2021 puts him in a category of violence so calculated, so savage, and so coldly concealed that it demands to be told. And Taylor Pomaski demands to be remembered. To understand what happened to Taylor, you have to understand who Kevin Ware Jr. was long before he ever met her. His criminal history did not begin with her disappearance. It did not begin after his NFL career ended. It began while he was still playing college football at the University of Washington, where he pleaded guilty to assault. After his 2-year NFL career collapsed, the charges kept coming. Another assault, evading arrest, intent to manufacture or deliver a controlled substance. The pattern was consistent and well documented. A man who had spent his entire adult life cycling through violence and legal consequences, each time finding a way to remain free, each time being given another chance by a system that wasn't paying close enough attention. By April 2021, Kevin Ware Jr. was 41 years old. He was living in the Houston, Texas area. He was in a relationship with Taylor Pomaski, who lived in a neighborhood near Klein Collins High School in the suburb of Spring. People who knew Taylor described her as warm and full of life. Her family loved her fiercely, and at least one person close to her was worried. Eric Zuliger, a former boyfriend, later gave interviews to Houston news stations that carry the weight of everything that went unsaid in time. He said Taylor had been reaching out to him throughout the month of April 2021. She was talking about getting out of the relationship, getting back on her feet, getting herself stable. She knew something was wrong. She was trying to find a way out. She ran out of time. On April 25th, 2021, Taylor Pomaski was at her own home, a house party in the Spring area. Kevin Ware Jr. was there. That was the last night anyone outside of Ware saw Taylor Pomaski alive. Her family reported her missing 2 days later, on April 27th. What followed was 8 months of silence. 8 months of her mother going on television, begging. 8 months of missing persons flyers. 8 months of Texas EquiSearch, a volunteer search and rescue organization, combing land and water, trying to find a young woman who had simply vanished. And during those 8 months, Kevin Ware Jr. was not hiding in a foreign country. He was not on the run. He was right there in Texas, pulled over in June 2021 going 115 miles per hour in a vehicle loaded with an AK-47, multiple other firearms, cocaine, and methamphetamine. He was arrested. He was in and out of jail on those unrelated charges. He never said a word about Taylor. In December 2021, 8 months after Taylor disappeared, searchers made a discovery in North Harris County. Human remains. It took investigators until April 2022 to formally identify them as Taylor Pomaski. She had been there, in a ditch in North Harris County, for most of those 8 months. Discarded. Hidden. While her mother went on television. While her family held vigils. While her friends shared posts online. Kevin Ware Jr. had known exactly where she was. When the forensic evidence came back, when investigators pieced together what had happened in that house in Spring on the night of April 25th, 2021, the picture was one of extraordinary brutality. Court documents revealed that Kevin Ware Jr. had killed Taylor Pomaski in at least 3 distinct ways. He cut her with a knife. He struck her with a blunt object. He strangled her. And then, as if the killing itself were not enough, he burned her body before dumping her remains in a ditch in North Harris County. Miles from where she had lived, miles from where her family was looking. He tried to erase her. In June 2022, a Harris County grand jury indicted Kevin Ware Jr. on 2 charges, murder and tampering with evidence, specifically a human corpse. He was already in jail at the time of the indictment, sitting on the drug and weapons charges from the June 2021 traffic stop. In December 2022, he pleaded guilty to the drug and weapons charges and accepted a 15-year concurrent sentence for those offenses. His murder trial was scheduled to begin in late 2023. But on the day jury selection was set to begin, Kevin Ware Jr. did something that spared Taylor's family the prolonged horror of a full trial. He pleaded guilty. Murder. Tampering with a human corpse. Under the terms of the plea agreement, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. He is 41 years old. If he serves the full sentence, he will be in his 70s when he is released. Taylor Pomaski was 29 years old. She will always be 29. Taylor's family gave victim impact statements in court. The details of what they said, the grief of a mother who spent 8 months not knowing, who spent 8 months hoping her daughter was somehow still alive somewhere, are not for us to recount here. But they were in that courtroom. They looked at the man who had killed their daughter, who had burned her body and hidden it in a ditch, and they spoke. That takes a kind of strength most of us will never be asked to find. There is something about the Kevin Ware Jr. case that sets it apart from even the other tragedies in this documentary. Is the timeline. 8 months. For 8 months, Taylor Pomaski's family did not know. Her mother went on camera. She made appeals. She asked questions. She held onto the possibility, the desperate, dwindling, agonizing possibility that Taylor was out there somewhere, that she might still come home. And during those 8 months, the man who knew the truth was a few counties away, getting arrested for drug and weapon charges, sitting in a jail cell, and staying silent. The cruelty of that silence is almost incomprehensible. The killing itself was an act of violence. But the silence, the 8 months of watching a family disintegrate in public grief while knowing exactly where their daughter's remains lay, that was a sustained, deliberate choice. Made every single day. Kevin Ware Jr. is not a famous name. He is not on trading cards hanging in anyone's childhood bedroom. He is not mentioned in NFL highlight reels or Hall of Fame discussions. But he wore an NFL uniform. The league gave him a platform, however brief. And the system that had documented his history of violence since his college days, that had watched him cycle through arrests and charges for nearly 2 decades, never found a way to interrupt the pattern before April 25th, 2021. Taylor Pomaski paid for that failure with her life. She deserved better from the people around her, from the systems that were supposed to protect her, and from a sports culture that still too often looks at a man's criminal history and asks, but can he play, before asking who is at risk. Her name was Taylor Pomaski. She was 29 years old. She wanted to get out. She deserved the chance. Next, Jim Dunaway. Most people have never heard of Jim Dunaway, and that is exactly the problem, because Jim Dunaway wasn't some fringe figure on a practice squad. He wasn't a career backup who barely made a roster. Jim Dunaway was a champion, a defensive tackle who stood 6 feet 5 inches tall and weighed close to 280 pounds, a force of nature on a defensive line that was, at its peak, one of the most dominant units in professional football history. He played 9 seasons for the Buffalo Bills in the AFL and NFL, was part of a defensive line that held opposing runners without a rushing touchdown for a record 17 consecutive games across the 1964 and 1965 seasons. And he finished his career, fittingly, in a way that seems grotesque in hindsight, as a member of the 1972 Miami Dolphins. The perfect team, the undefeated team, 16 wins, no losses, a Super Bowl championship. The only team in NFL history to finish a season without a single defeat. Jim Dunaway was on that team. He has a Super Bowl ring. He also, according to a grand jury investigation, murdered his ex-wife. Nananiel Dunaway had spent years married to Jim. The marriage eventually collapsed, and in 1995, a divorce judgment awarded Nananiel more than 800 acres of land that the couple owned together, $1,800 a month in alimony, and, perhaps most painfully for Jim, half of his NFL pension. Jim Dunaway planned to appeal the judgment. The legal battle over money and land continued to simmer. On July 27, 1998, 3 years after the divorce, Nananiel Dunaway was found dead by a relative. She was in a half-empty swimming pool at a house she owned near the Cherica community in South Carolina. She was 56 years old. The Marion County coroner ordered an autopsy. What investigators found was not a drowning, not an accident, not a tragic fall. Nananiel Dunaway had an open fracture to her skull. She had been struck hard enough to fracture bone, hard enough to render her unconscious. And then, while she was unconscious and unable to save herself, she had been placed in that pool. She drowned while she was already unconscious. She never had a chance to fight. She never had a chance to scream. Jim Dunaway was taken in for questioning. Charges were filed against him within days. He was arrested for the murder of his former wife. And then the American legal system, as it had done before, as it would do again, found a way to let a man with money, connections, and a Super Bowl ring walk free. The case went to a grand jury. The grand jury determined there was insufficient evidence for an indictment. Jim Dunaway was not charged. He was not tried. He walked out of the process a free man. The investigation was not reopened. No one was ever convicted of killing Nananiel Dunaway. Her family did not accept this outcome. In 2002, 4 years after her death, Nananiel's children filed a civil wrongful death lawsuit against Jim Dunaway. A civil jury, applying the lower standard of proof that civil cases require, found in their favor. Jim Dunaway was ordered to pay $500,000 in damages. He had been found civilly liable for the death of the woman he had once been married to. The woman whose pension rights and land had cost him so much. The woman who had been found unconscious with a fractured skull in a half-empty pool. But he never spent a day in prison for it. He never faced criminal accountability. Nananiel Dunaway deserved better. She deserved a criminal justice system that treated the evidence, a fractured skull, an unconscious victim placed in water to drown, with the seriousness it demanded. She deserved prosecutors who had the tools and the will to build a case, even when physical evidence was limited. She deserved to be more than a footnote in her ex-husband's Wikipedia page. She was 56 years old. She had won her divorce case. She had the land, the alimony, the pension rights. She had fought for her future and won. And then someone took that future away from her. Her children fought for 4 years to get even partial justice. Jim Dunaway's Super Bowl ring has never been taken away. Next, Anthony McLanahan. Her name was Carrie. Everyone called her KC. She was 28 years old, the youngest of 10 siblings. A mother of 2, a 9-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. A woman who, according to everyone who knew her, lit up every room she entered. She had a passion for helping people. She had recently traveled to Texas and Florida to volunteer with communities devastated by hurricanes. She loved to run. She loved to snowboard. She was, in the words of her sister Heather Goff, instantly loved by people. She was such an amazing mother, Heather said, and such a beautiful humanitarian. Casey McLanahan was trying to leave her husband. She didn't make it. Anthony McLanahan had a football career that hovered at the edges of the professional game. A 3-year starting linebacker at Washington State. For seasons in the Canadian Football League with the Calgary Stampeders. Signed by the Dallas Cowboys in the early 1990s, but cut before the regular season began without ever playing a down in an NFL game. He was, in the technical sense of NFL rosters, an ex-Cowboy. His connection to the league was brief and largely invisible. But in the years that followed, his name would appear in crime reports far more than it had ever appeared in a box score. Anthony McLanahan and Carrie had married in January 2017. By September of that same year, less than 9 months into the marriage, the violence had already begun. He punched her in the face. She packed her bags immediately. She drove 24 hours straight from Phoenix, Arizona, back to her family in Washington State. Her sister Heather later recalled that Carrie was scared the entire drive. Scared he would track her down on the road. Scared he would find her. She made it home safely. But she went back. She went back because she was trying to help him. Because even as she was separating her life from his, she believed she could assist him. That is the cruelty of abusive relationships. The way they distort loyalty and compassion into instruments that keep victims close to danger. By October 2017, Anthony McLanahan had also been charged with child kidnapping, removing his 8-year-old son from school in Arizona without the mother's permission and refusing to return the boy even after a court order was issued. He was arrested in Utah. He posted bail a week later. He had pending domestic violence charges in both Arizona and Utah. He was out on bail, and Carrie, trying to help him get back on his feet, trying to end things on decent terms, agreed to meet him in Park City, Utah. On the morning of November 2nd, 2017, someone at the Park Regency Resort condominiums called 911 to report a disturbance. A man had been seen crawling through the hallways on his stomach, calling for help. A patrol sergeant spotted Anthony McLanahan outside the building, covered in blood. He flagged the officer down, then dropped to the ground and began convulsing, his arms moving in what the officer described as a snow angel motion. When police entered the third-floor condominium Anthony had rented, they found Carrie McLanahan's body. She had cuts to the front of her neck, the back of her neck, the sides of her neck. She had other defensive wounds. She had carpet burns, signs that she had struggled, had fought, had refused to go without resistance. The murder weapon was found inside the condo. It was a small, sharp knife she had been carrying herself, sheathed in a paracord bracelet she wore. Her sister later said Carrie had developed an interest in knives and carried the bracelet partly for self-protection. She had brought a knife to protect herself. It was used to take her life. Anthony McLanahan's story fell apart almost immediately. He told investigators that he and Carrie and their baby had been attacked by 2 or 3 men, white men, wearing black jackets. He gave a description. He acted the part of a grieving, wounded survivor. But there was no baby. Investigators found no evidence of an infant anywhere in the condo. Surveillance footage showed no one else entering the building. There were no signs of forced entry. Every door was secured. The lie was transparent. The evidence was overwhelming. He was arrested. He was charged with murder. In March 2019, Anthony McLanahan pleaded guilty. In April 2019, he was sentenced to a minimum of 15 years to life in prison. Carrie's 5 siblings appeared in court to deliver victim impact statements. Her sister Christine Schmidt spoke directly about Casey's 2 children, the daughter and son who would now grow up without their mother. No graduations, no proms, no weddings. Something would always be missing from their lives. Part of them is gone, she said. The prosecutor told the judge he believed parole authorities would require McLanahan to remain in prison for the rest of his life. There is one detail in this story that cannot be left unsaid. Anthony McLanahan, according to his sister-in-law, sometimes referenced head injuries from his football career when explaining his behavior. He tried to use the specter of CTE, the brain disease that has become a complicated, contested presence in conversations about NFL violence, as partial mitigation. Heather Goff rejected that framing entirely. She told reporters she doubted football injuries were the root cause of his violence. And she was right to reject it, because the violence began not with a medical diagnosis, but with a choice. The punch in September, the kidnapping of his son in October, the killing in November. Each of those was a decision, a series of decisions, made by a man who had been given chance after chance, by bail systems, by courts, by the woman who loved him enough to try to help him even as he was destroying her. Casey McLanahan was 28 years old. She had 2 children who needed her. She had siblings who adored her. She was, by every account, someone who made the world better simply by being in it. He definitely dimmed her light so much, her sister said, and it was really hard to watch. She deserved to shine. Next, Darren Lee. This chapter is different from the others, because Darren Lee's case is not history. It is not something that happened decades ago, in an era before the NFL had domestic violence policies, before the Ray Rice video, before the public conversation had shifted. Darren Lee's case happened in February 2026, less than 3 months ago, and it happened after years of warning signs that were documented, prosecuted, and then minimized, plea bargained away, and quietly forgotten by a system that had every opportunity to intervene. Darren Lee was a first-round pick, not a fringe player, not someone the league barely knew. The New York Jets selected him 20th overall in the 2016 NFL Draft out of Ohio State, where he had been the defensive MVP of the Sugar Bowl. He was young, talented, and athletic, a linebacker built for the modern game. He played 3 seasons for the Jets, starting 36 games and recording 3 interceptions. He was traded to the Kansas City Chiefs, and in 2020, he won a Super Bowl ring when the Chiefs claimed Super Bowl 54. He played 2 games for the Buffalo Bills before his NFL career wound down. By the time it was over, Darren Lee had a Super Bowl ring an NFL career, and a history of documented violence that the system around him had consistently failed to address seriously. In April 2023, Dublin, Ohio police responded to a domestic violence call at a home involving Darren Lee. What officers found was disturbing. According to police reports, when Lee's mother arrived at the home after another woman, the mother of Lee's young son, expressed that she felt unsafe, a confrontation erupted. Lee allegedly pushed his mother against a wall. Then he shoved her to the ground. Then he punched her in the face 8 or 9 times. He punched his own mother in the face. Repeatedly. He was charged with domestic violence and assault. In October 2024, he was arrested in Florida for pointing a gun at a man. And in February 2025, less than a year before the events that would make national headlines, Lee entered a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor count of aggravated assault. He was sentenced to 2 years of probation. The domestic violence designation, which would have carried heavier consequences, was removed from the charge as part of the deal. He avoided a felony conviction. He avoided prison. He was placed on probation in order to have no contact with his victims. 3 months later, Gabriella Carvalho Perpetuo was dead. On February 5, 2026, first responders were dispatched to a residence on Snow Cone Lane in Ooltewah, Tennessee, a suburb of Chattanooga, after receiving a call about CPR in progress. They arrived to find a 29-year-old woman, later identified as Gabriella Carvalho Perpetuo of Florida. She was Darren Lee's girlfriend. Paramedics attempted to save her life. They could not. Gabriella Carvalho Perpetuo was pronounced dead. Preliminary findings confirmed her death was a homicide. Darren Lee was at the scene. He was taken into custody immediately. He was charged with first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. He was also found in possession of cocaine at the time of his arrest. He was held without bond. He was 31 years old. He had a Super Bowl ring. He had a history of violence stretching back years. And a 29-year-old woman from Florida was dead. Gabriella Carvalho Perpetuo. Say her name. She was 29 years old. She had traveled from Florida to Tennessee to be with a man who, according to public records, had already demonstrated a clear and documented pattern of violence against the people closest to him. Court documents later revealed that in the weeks before her death, there had been a series of domestic disturbance reports and emergency responses at a Florida residence connected to Lee and Gabriella. The warning signs were accumulating. They were being reported. They were being documented. And they were not enough to stop what happened on Snow Cone Lane. The Darren Lee case forces us to ask a question that is uncomfortable but necessary. What is a domestic violence probation order worth if the person on probation is allowed to acquire cocaine, carry weapons, and travel freely while a woman in his life is living in documented danger? What is a misdemeanor plea deal worth? The kind of deal that strips away the domestic violence designation and replaces a felony with probation. If the result is that a man with a demonstrated history of violence against women and family members is essentially handed a clean slate and sent back into the world. Lee had been arrested in 2023. He had been arrested in 2024. He had entered a plea deal in February 2025 that gave him probation and ordered him to stay away from victims. By February 2026, Gabriella Carvalho Perpetuo was dead, and he was in handcuffs at the scene. The system had 11 months between his plea deal and her death. 11 months during which every piece of documented evidence pointed toward escalation. 11 months. It was not enough. Or rather, the system did not make it enough. Darren Lee, as of the time this script was written, has been charged but not yet tried. He is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. His case is ongoing. But Gabriella Carvalho Perpetuo is not presumed anything. She is not in a courtroom. She is not waiting for a verdict. She is gone. She was 29 years old. She was somebody's daughter, somebody's friend, a woman who had her own dreams, her own story, her own future, a future that was taken from her in a house in Tennessee while the man she was with had been on probation for domestic violence for less than a year. The NFL gave Darren Lee a first-round draft pick, a platform, and a Super Bowl ring. The legal system gave him probation and a second chance. Gabriella Carvalho Perpetuo did not get a second chance. They happened inside a system. A billion-dollar system that for decades prioritized wins over warnings, touchdowns over trauma, and talent over the safety of women. We started this video by talking about the worship of NFL players, the jerseys, the chants, the benefit of the doubt. That worship is not inherently wrong. These men are extraordinary athletes. The game they play is genuinely compelling. The passion of the fans who follow them is real. But worship without accountability is dangerous. When we place athletes on pedestals so high that we cannot see what they do in private, when we let wins erase warning signs, when we let touchdowns drown out 911 calls, we become complicit in what follows. Every time the system looks away, someone pays with their life. The lesson of these stories, the lesson we owe to these women, is not that NFL players are monsters. Most aren't. The lesson is that when money and fame and cultural power concentrate in one place, accountability tends to evaporate. And when accountability evaporates, the most vulnerable people pay the price. We owe it to Nicole. We owe it to Cherica. We owe it to Cassandra. We owe it to Taylor. We owe it to Carrie. We owe it to Gabriella. We owe it to Nananiel. We owe it to every woman whose name never made a headline, but whose family knows exactly what was lost. We owe them our attention, our anger, and our refusal to look away. If this video opened your eyes to stories you didn't fully know, share it. These women's stories deserve to be heard. Subscribe for more documentary-style NFL content that goes beyond the highlight reel. Thank you for your attention.